I'm Aaron Sagers, and this is Talking Strange. Hello, all spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek network. As always, I'm your host, journalist, author, researcher of weird things, Aaron Sagers, also from 28 Days Haunted on Netflix and Paranormal Caught on Camera on Travel Channel and the Max streaming service, now airing its 6th season. And this round, right now, we are doing The Mask. We're doing the Monster Mask, and it is a graveyard smash. And from the world of writer and creator David Dastmalchian and artist Lucas Kettner's hit Dark Horse comic series, Count Crowley, Reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter, comes 2 exclusive silicone masks from Immortal Masks, leaders in the silicone masks and custom creature world. And those masks include Jerry Bartman, the now mediocre monster hunter herself, as well as her nefarious fanged foe, Hubert the vampire. And to talk about the comic characters brought to the real world, available now at immortalmask.com, we have the creator of the characters and of the creature mask all together, writer, actor, and fellow spooky nerd David Dastmalchian, and Immortal Mask's co-owner George Frangidakis. Guys, here we are.
It is happening. Oh man, it's so good to see you, dude. I love you. You're such an awesome monster kid, and thanks for letting us come talk about this. And I'm so excited to be here with my
thanks
buddy.
For having us and visiting us in our shop. We're live from the sculpting room of Immortal Masks, and you can see in the background here, wave to the camera. That's Andrew Freeman. He's working on a mask right now, actually, for the company. And where are you, Patrick? That's Patrick Matthews.
Hi, Patrick.
He's in the back right now, sculpting too. You guys are like in the heart, the belly of the beast right now.
There's the North Pole where Santa's elves make toys for Christmas, and then there's the basement of hell, which is where we are, where the demons are sculpting all the monsters for Halloween.
It's nice and warm.
It's a good, it's all right. I like it.
It's
good meats here.
Santa has his little helpers. Satan has his little helpers.
Yeah.
So
somewhere in the
middle. Well, I want to find out about just the relationship between you, David, and George, and then just Immortal Masks overall. Before we get into the guts of this thing, how do you guys know each other? Is it just because you're all nerds together? Take it away, David.
It's the magic of movies and monsters. George was in special effects makeup and doing incredible work when I was starting my acting career, and our lives intersected on not 1, not 2, but 3 independent films back in the day.
Yeah,
and
12, 13 years ago.
Longer, almost 14 years, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
but
crazy.
One of the first people I met when I moved to Los Angeles, we also worked together in New York. And we just stayed close. You meet certain people in this work who you love and you bond with, and we stayed close.
Yeah. It's like I think I've noticed this by working on different projects and films. Like you develop your acquaintances, you develop the people you work with, and then you have this smaller group that's like family.
Yeah.
And then you always kind of you know that no matter where you are in the world, you can reconnect. It's like a day never passed. That's been this guy with me for years now. And
yeah. And it's really cool for me because I watched from afar as George made a major pivot in his career. He went from just working on film sets and doing special effects makeup to becoming a partner at one of the most kick-ass companies in the world of monsters. And then for me, my career just continued to grow in the acting, and George would check in and be like, oh dude, I just saw this thing, or wow, that's so cool. And then the comic book and my writing life took off.
The people around him in the early days of things knew this guy was
knew that I would someday be arrested for
no. There's a weird. I gotta find it sometime. There's a Comic-Con interview back when we were doing Sushi Girl, and I remember that they asked. It was asking about who to watch for, and I was like, this guy.
Oh,
thanks,
it was just.
Man. I mean,
thanks.
Yeah, it was
thanks.
Shows so.
Well, we were, it's like Aaron, like when I met you, there's a lot of people that have different involvements in our industry, and that's fine. We need people for all the different sides of it. But when you meet and know the real monster kids and the guys that live and breathe and die this stuff, like that's I always knew that about George early on. And
that's funny because that's like what you're even saying is like a big reason why this company even exists. Like I came to LA to work in Hollywood and work in stuff, but I was the kid that grew up planning my Halloween costume out in early spring, and
as you should.
Yeah,
I don't understand people. They don't know what they are yet. It's September, folks. How do people not know what they are?
Right, totally. And so then even if you ask my parents now, I own a mask company. They're like, that's exactly what you should have been doing. And so the fun part is we get to still work on film, television, and music and all this fun, all my fun. Stuff.
I don't want to be interviewer. I don't want to take Aaron's job from him, but I do think it's a cool story because Andrew Freeman, who founded the company, how did that? I know you've told me before, but so you were working in movies, and then Andrew had.
So,
sorry, Aaron,
I was gonna. Well, you're asking great questions, David, because that's where I was gonna go to next. I wanted to find out about the monster origins of Immortal Masks, because I know George, you, and then Andrew and Michelle Freeman. You guys are all kind of co-creators, mad scientists of this amazing operation. So, talk about the origins of that.
So like David was saying, we met working. On movies, and at that time I was working for another company, and that's where I met who become my future partner, Andrew Freeman. Again, wave, Andrew. We met working at another effects studio, like many people, and I think that short relationships in the industry, you start somewhere, and I think you always have these interesting bond if you start at the same place together,
Totally.
So Andrew was was a lead sculptor, and I was the studio supervisor of a shop, and like anything else, you start to kind of grow, and eventually you kind of want to move on and do your own thing.
Sure.
So I wasn't sure what that was going to be because it wasn't working for me where I was at the time, and Andrew had already started this company in his garage, like any great success story. It started in the garage, and so Immortal Mask was already founded when Andrew and I had met. So to speed it up a bit, I left that studio, and then so did Andrew, and then so did a couple other people that we're friends with, other artists too. It was just kind of a coincidental, it was just time to move on type thing. I was actually working with Destin Foff. I don't even know that, but a producer and writer, Sushi Girl, about possibly maybe getting out of effects and going into producing. When I got a call from this guy behind me and goes, "Hey, would you want to come take a look at my mask company?" And I said, no. I was like, I thought I was over effects for a minute. I was like, I don't think so, dude. I think I'm just going to try maybe writing or something. And then reality kicked in. I had a newborn at the time, and I was like, I kind of need a job though. So, okay, I'll come check it out. And so I did. I showed up, and I actually came in as an employee. And so Andrew hired me as a supervisor to kind of set the groundwork for what would become our company. And he's an absolutely amazing artist, and he was lucky enough to he had an original partner he bought out that wasn't working out, and then he brought his wife in, which is our third partner, Michelle, and she'll pop in here in a minute. And I came in to run the company as a supervisor, and then I think maybe it was like 3 to 6 months into the whole thing. It was just obvious that this was a good fit, and I didn't want a job anymore. I wanted a career, and I put it out on the table. I said, "Hey, why don't we partner, make this a thing?"
When did Face Off happen in that space of time?
Well, so funny. Face Off came around the first time at right when this was happening, and Andrew actually had to kind of, in a roundabout way, decline it in our first year because
he was so busy.
Yeah, right. We're starting a company, and so it was like, "Nah, you can't go do it, dude." So bail out, get out of the, And so he did. And then I think about 2 or 3 years later, they came creeping back around again. Maybe it was like 3 or 4 years later, actually. And at that point in time, I was like, "We got this. Go
do it."
Yeah. And so he did, and so he went and he won, which was awesome. So season 12, the last season of Face Off, Andrew Freeman was the champion, which we all knew he would be. Look at that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like we had, and I'm gonna give him even more props right now because that's a makeup effects show, right? And
Right.
so, going into it as friends and partners, there was a little bit of strategizing kind of in there, work on these kind of makeups, do this kind of stuff. And he's like, what about silicone masks? I'm like, no, don't do silicone masks. It's hard. They're all geared for foam latex. And, you did that before. You know how to do makeups. And then he went and he did the finale. And Glenn Hendrick said, the finale is going to be a haunt, which kind of was like right up our alley. And then, and I like to see silicone. He's like, screw it, I'm doing silicone masks. So the dude figured out how to do silicone masks like in a day, which is pretty amazing.
So nuts.
And he won Face Off doing what we do best.
And certainly I love that show. And the fact that it really kind of started bringing outside of like the hardcore kind of monster kids and the horror nerds, it sort of brought the language into the mainstream a little bit more. And I think I would argue that that's also what's happening with Immortal Masks, is that we're seeing these Hollywood level creations, but they're available in the mainstream for people to purchase. And that's just a beautiful thing and amazing products.
Thanks.
And yeah,
that's exactly what we wanted to do.
Well,
that's it. We thought there had to be more people like us out there. Like when we grew up, like wanting, like I wanted the Predator, like I watched the movie. I was like, how do I get that? I want to be that. And so we kind of banked on the fact that there's maybe more of us out there. That if we made these things available to the general public, that we would connect with them, and through the internet and word of mouth and guys like this guy here supporting us, we were able to connect to a lot of people, and the company was kind of off and running.
And yet there's this element that it's one thing to be doing masks that even though they're original concepts, they look classic and iconic. And then it's another thing to be doing officially licensed masks like Art the Clown from Terrifier. But then we're entering this whole other level where you're bringing this character on the two-dimensional page and bringing it to life. So those initial conversations, what did those look like as far as, hey, I've got this comic book and I want to get some masks made of it?
Sure.
Go with that.
I've always believed that the success in my journey as a storyteller is in dreaming as big as possible and being as authentic to myself and the visions that live inside my crazy brain as possible. Count Crowley is a summation of all of that in so many ways. So the fact that I'm doing the publishing deal and getting to make a comic book based on this character in this world to me is such a dream. And then the thought of masks and mask making was something that really just it was something that I couldn't get out of my head. And because George is a friend, I wanted to just talk to him about, look, I understand this is not a IP that is as expansive or as far reaching as some of the larger, studio IPs that they work with. Obviously, you already mentioned like with Art the Clown and Terrifier. That's something that everybody knows. So many people have seen those films, and that's a character that's well established. With a comic book character we have a great following, and I love our fans and anybody who's watching that's a Crowley reader. I love you. But I knew that instinctually for, the idea of a mask, especially at this level and quality to work, it would need to be something that appealed to people, whether they're familiar with Count Crowley or not. And George reaffirmed that when we met, because he was like, dude, your characters, and Lucas, who is my artist, his designs are so badass. I think that they're going to appeal to people who haven't even maybe read Count Crowley yet. And that was that I was comfortable out the gate with that being like, great, because what could happen is people just wear a kick-ass mask for Halloween, and we know in our hearts that came from our imaginations and this world that we've created. It could also have people like fall in love with their mask and then be like, oh, now I want to know more about this world, because in my dream, my biggest dream is that we get to keep doing these, and there's so many more fun characters to come,
Well, and that was it. Like he created the they're riffs on iconic imagery. Like David has your classic monsters in there, and then he has a relatable anti-hero, which was awesome because that's kind of the world that we're appealing to. Our audience is both introduced to characters that we introduce them to, and then back at us. So like this was a good bridge of the bridging the gap thing. This was a type of IP that I like doing. We did one with Sideshow Collectibles. The Court of the Dead. Right, and so we were like really big fans of Court of the Dead, but like most people know Sideshow for like Iron Man statues and things like that. But we were like, oh well, that's our audience. Those are the people that we were appealing to. That's the haunted attraction people. That's the and they don't even have to know about it because this fits into their world.
Yes.
And it was the same thing with all the characters that he created. We saw this. We're like, well, you have a unique take on these things.
Thanks.
These would translate really well to a three-dimensional image and something that somebody can wear and act out and be and get into. And we're getting a really good response to these, by the way.
Like for Jerry Bartman, for example, who's the hero of the show, that's Count Crowley.
Yeah.
But let's say you don't read Count Crowley yet, or maybe you've just seen the covers in a comic shop, or you've seen posters at Comic Cons and stuff. Like, what I love about the look of that, and now as a mask, is it's like that's a kick-ass ghoul. That's like a kick-ass character that you could dress any way you wanted, and it's also, to me, almost got a Susie Sue or like 80s goth ghoul vibe to it. But yet, somebody who knows Jerry sees that mask at a convention. Somebody wearing that at a party is going to be like, "Holy shit, that's Count Crowley!"
Like it was one of those things where like every once in a while you do a mask, you're like, yeah, I think it's going to be cool, and then you do it, and then you put it on an actor or actress, and you're like, wow, that really worked out well. And it was like, as soon as we got this on, like made it and got it on, and if you go to our website and go to the page for this mask, you'll see the movement video, and it's like the same comment we get for everybody is, wow, I can't believe that was a mask. Like it really worked well.
It looks like a makeup.
It was one of those ones where I'm like, ooh, that was good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's something I want to hone in a little bit more on, George, because yes, I mean, sure, Jerry on the page is evoking these classic horror movie hosts and goth chicks, and you could easily, have a feminine face, white paint, grease paint, fright wig, and yet this mask, it does look like a real person. There is this defined bone structure, and that was immediately what I wanted to know about was, well, who was Jerry in the real world? How I mean, the conversations that you had and Andrew and the creative team had with David, what questions were you asking about? Okay, well, what does she look like? What's her jawline look like? What does this person, how do they exist in the real world? What do they look like in the real world? What were those questions that you were asking David as a creator?
Well, I mean, one was when they actually were more specifics, like how do we do the hair? Things like it was little things like that.
They were very careful, or not sensitive to being like, oh, we want to make sure we're honoring your character. So like, if we do this, what do you think about that? If we did this, how does this feel? Because we feel like this might lend itself more to the silicone mask design that maybe is a little bit of a click from the thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Yeah. This is Andrew.
One thing that really helped was, David sent us a bunch of imagery from the comic books, and then we, read the comics and kind of, I wanted to try to find panels from the actual comic book that, because, the comic book is image based and what we do is very image based. I wanted to try to find certain images that really spoke to the characters. So I would say, by going over these, different panels of the art, trying to find the most, expressive, panels that would kind of characterize, each character. I don't have the specific one that we use for Hubert, but there's one particular panel where his mouth was really distended, and that kind of served as the inspiration that we actually went and did like a little 3D maquette, which is this guy here. So we're able to kind of like basically take the 2D art, kind of do like a little like idea, kind of like a 3D model sketch that can be 3D printed basically while we're sleeping, and then the next day kind of like talk about this as a 3D image, and then it's much easier to translate that into a life-size wearable mask. But it's definitely a lot of communication and trying to keep true to the imagery from the comic book.
And then on Jerry, it was more about subtleties, because like
the smeared makeup,
right? So we were talking about like the sculptural form of Jerry. we chose to not really push the design aspects there, and it paid off because it's like simple little things, like just a bit of rounding here, the nose upturned just a little bit, things that we saw in those panels that Andrew was talking about, that when, like, if you saw the actress who was wearing the mask, you would go, oh my God, they don't look anything alike.
Right.
So that's how effective the subtleties in the sculpture were. And then the rest was just translating the makeup. So making it a permanent makeup, making it so.
And would you guys agree? I feel like the Crowley design that Lucas created, because that was always something that I wanted, but I didn't know how to properly describe, evokes something that, because I've worn, and guys have worn the mask too. There is something almost like neutralizing gender-wise that, like, I think anybody could wear that mask and pull off Count Crowley.
Right. And I mean, I like the idea that, the reluctant, vampire hunter is also almost like an everyday kind of person. It could be, basically when you put on the masks, a lot of expression comes from the actual wearer's eyes and stuff. So I feel like, we didn't want to do like an Angelina Jolie kind of bone structure. So that would overpower the character. I feel like, the character that Count Crowley is, it's like an everyday kind of,
and it sits so well on people's faces.
And that's the biggest thing. That's why it translated so well to any wearer. That was the thing. It was like crazy. Like,
who can put this on?
Right.
Anybody.
Yeah.
To borrow a phrase from a separate IP, anyone can wear the mask. And David, I want you to tell me, and as much both your reaction, and if you can speak to Lucas's reaction of when you saw the Jerry mask initially.
Yeah.
And you said, "Yep, that's the Jerry that I created." And if you could speak to sort of Lucas's reaction as well, like, that's Jerry.
Yeah. It came in a photo first, because I'd been to the studio and been hanging out with the guys and talking a lot about, and I came to visit, and it was really cool to see that they had already printed up this is the magic shop in here. And at that moment, while they were working on these sculpts and designs, the walls were kind of covered with Crowley imagery and stuff. And then George sent me some test photos of, they were playing with painting, a look and design. And I freaked out. Like, I was so excited. I immediately wanted to get on the phone and call him and like give my input and thoughts. Lucas, who is as dark as his artwork has been, anyone who's a fan of Lucas Kedner's artwork, he has made the most violent stuff in comics I've seen. And it's so beautiful, and he's so talented and gifted. He's like our Bernie Wrightson, but he doesn't usually curse ever. And I wish I was like, I should dig back through the text. We text a lot, but when I sent him the first images, I think it was just all caps, holy shit, which is pretty great.
That's what I want to hear.
That guy doesn't cuss. And he was so excited, man. Isn't it? It's weird when Lucas and I started looking back on this, because we've been on this journey together for a long time. When we used to daydream about what Count Crowley could be and where we could go with it, on top of the stories and the plots that we're developing and that I'm continuing to explore, we did always say, like, how rad would it be someday if there was a mask? And now there's not one mask, there's a Jerry mask. Then the Hubert mask came in and I freaked out. Oh, look who's here. Andrew as a visitor.
Here,
We have another
here's a lifeblood of Immortal mask. Come over here.
We've got
lifeblood.
Yeah. This is Michelle Freeman.
Hi, Michelle.
So she's the one that tolerates us. Puts up with
everybody.
Puts up with our weird stuff, and then and makes sure that we're also at times normal human beings by doing things like,
at times I'm just as weird.
She's
It's like a clubhouse for monster kids. I love coming out here because you walk in the door, the dog is there, you're on the phone talking to like customers or clients and making sure everything is going the way it needs to go. And as soon as you walk in the door, there's just monster gack everywhere, posters, and there's sculptures and there's masks. I love it. You guys have created like a very a home here.
This is my LA family. I'm the transplant. I'm from the Bay Area, and so when I came out here, it's like you don't know. It takes a while to figure out if you're fitting into the town that is becoming your home, but to have people that become your family, helps you become rooted in there. And so I'm very lucky to have both Andrew and Michelle as both my business partners, but my family here. And so, and because I actually come from mostly a family business background, I worked for my grandfather, I worked for my dad, it's interesting because that's all I know. So we run this company, and no matter how weird and big and this machine's been getting over the years, it's still run like a family business. Like you said, you walk in, there's the dog, and there's, and so and we don't.
I need some more. I need some more hoodies, by the way.
Oh, we can do that.
Yeah, so.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the other newborn, the second newborn of this monster family that is growing, and that's Hubert the vampire, the mask.
Sure.
And with Hubert, we've had a lot of vampire characters and creatures out there in comics and in cinema, and Immortal has done vampiric creatures before. So talk about the approach to Hubert and bringing him to life, and what were some of the specific elements that you really wanted to hit on for this monster?
Well, it's interesting. So exactly, you kind of hit the nail on the head on that one, because when we were examining the different possibilities of characters from the book to do, we're like, okay, well, he's got a kind of a Frank character, and he's got kind of a werewolf character, and like, okay, well, we have those in our catalog, so like we don't want one to compete with the other one so much, and
we're introducing a new world to people. So it's like, if you're not yet familiar with Count Crowley, and you're not already like, oh, I'm a diehard Stephen the Werewolf fan, or I'm a diehard Dave the Bilatombia zombie fan, like what's going to grab your attention? And so that's where I had to defer completely to these guys, to just because I was like, I'm lucky that there's already a Jerry Mac. Then when they wanted to do a monster, I was like, what is your strategy for that?
Well, and I think Andrew said it best. He saw this, we just turned to the artwork.
Looking into comics.
Yeah. And then it's like, what grabbed you? And again, Andrew, like I said, it was this panel that was really based off this, what the 3D print became, where it was just this, we're like, it's the mouth. We look at little things like that. What's the thing that we're gonna build it off of? It's sharp, it is, dude. And so that was kind of where we started from, and we're like, and I think it's great because there's an organic thing that happens even when we're working with an IP, and especially when we're working with this one. And Andrew can jump in on this one because I know he felt. I watched him. I love watching him work. So
that was that George was texting me and being like, dude, Andrew is like going to town.
I know. It's like as I see when all of a sudden it just turns on, and like I watch Andrew get into it,
Well, I think, like from an artistic standpoint, I think most artists want to have some kind of emotional impact with their audience. So something I like to do is try to kind of dissect the psychology, I guess, of a character. And that panel that stood out with the distended jaw and the jutting out teeth, it was very primal, and in my opinion, it kind of struck a chord as like, oh, this can immediately scare people because it kind of taps into that kind of primal instinct that we as humans still have, but like maybe don't recognize all the time. For instance, if you're walking down the street and you saw a stray dog and you went to pet it and it bared its teeth, then instinctually we know, leave it alone, otherwise it's going to bite you. That's the programming that we still have as humans. So to use some of that psychology and try to tap that into the mask, I feel like it gives it more of a primal fear, instinctual fear. So and there's that whole level.
It's like Friedkin filmmaking, but in mask work.
Totally, Yeah. Well, and then Aaron, to kind of go to your point earlier, like you're right, we had a bunch of vampires in our catalog, and we're in this position now in our company where it's like when you start a company, you do like, oh, I need a vampire character, or I need this, and then as your company gets bigger, you realize that, well, I have the ability now to make a couple different ones because this may not be your flavor of vampire, so let's do the more bat looking one, or let's do the Buffy brow one. And so we had a bunch of vampires, and we were like, and then this one came along, and we're like, but we don't have this, at all. And so it really worked as not only honoring their work, but it worked in honoring the catalog too. Like we didn't have that, whether it was their design, we didn't have anything like this. And so I watched, like I said, I get to watch him work, sculpt, that's a privilege of mine as being his friend and partner, is that I get to see him. I see the spark, when Andrew starts getting into something.
Yeah. Those texts I was getting, George was like, dude, he is going to town on this thing.
Yeah.
I was like,
he was like, you started, and that's, I think, when he's talking about what the relatable fear, analogy he used with the stray dog. I think that's what he kept seeing. He's like, oh, this is gonna be badass.
Yeah.
He started getting into it, and it really was. It was like, and then the minute we released it, I on a personal level, I have texts from like customers of mine, friend customers, and that going, dude, that thing's badass. When's it coming out?
Yeah.
So
I like I very much like the feral quality of Hubert, and it reminds me of, and I believe it's our first introduction of Hubert in the back of the cab in the airport. I think, but it's that launching forward kind of motion. That's what it reminds me of from the comic book panel, and from what, and I really want to I want to get my hands on these and play with them in person. But what I can see is it does look like this protrusion of the fangs is so effective that it conveys that animalistic quality. But as a mask wearer, these masks seem very effectively constructed insofar as the wearer is hidden. Like, you're not seeing the mouth. You're not seeing. It seems like they're able to really hide within.
We have a variant here. We pulled a variant over.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things too with Immortal Mask is that you've got the traditional Hubert design here, but there's variants as well. So there's this version of Hubert.
This one's a color we call Barlow blue, as an homage to Barlow, obviously, where it floats somewhere between blue and gray. And so we, obviously, in seeing this and imagining him as as different versions of a vampire world, we took this color. I have a pale one that we're doing the bloody mouth on, and then I got one flesh one with a 5 o'clock shadow coming. So it's like,
it's awesome. And by the way, because as you know, with Lucas Kettner's vampire designs, werewolf designs, Bilatombia zombie designs, all the monsters that are yet to come, there are shades of the traditional monsters we know and love, but they always have a variation to them that makes them special. So like future vampires, they're always going to have the way that the jaw works in the world of Count Crowley. So like Oscar the vampire, or maybe some other vampires that exist in Count Crowley. If people really love the Hubert, it would be exciting to see the future of like other variants. But like when you wear this mask and you stretch your jaw, this stretches with you.
Yeah. So we made it so that there's an area we call lip cupping, and it's back here, and that it fits over your own lip. So effectively, the cool thing about doing a mask with outer teeth, because it really was important that this mask displayed this mouth. So we get this really cool action, but because it covers your own lips, it hides your own mouth behind it, and you really do look like you have that distended jaw, that nasty bite. And we call it double chinning, where you actually like you take your mouth and you kind of close it nice and shut, where this interlocks really well. It just was fun to watch.
The jaw, forehead. I mean, it's so wonderful. The difference between a silicone mask and like the cheapy stuff that you could get is like the effect of it is so powerful.
When we shoot our movement videos, so on all of our masks on our website, they have a specific page and they have a movement video, and we usually start with the first color. So the movement videos of this one right here, of the flesh tone one. When we see it do the thing that we're hoping that it does, is like a magic moment for us. It's like when our world crosses the film world, and
Christmas.
In this case, it was, and you'll see the magic moment if you watch the movement video. It's on the profile shot. It's when he turns and opens the mouth really wide. And we're like, it did what we were hoping it was going to do. It got, it's like it opened really wide and it had this nasty looking bite. And like, that's what we wanted. Beautiful. This is stuff that happens with the silicone mask was already there too. We get good eyebrow movement and neck turning, and it just kind of comes to life. But since that mouth, that was the one that got me and him back there, like that we wanted to make sure that it worked the way that we were hoping it would work, and it did. And you can see it on the video. That was the first time we don't really do that many like retakes of our videos. It's kind of like we have an actor that comes in and does most of our work with us. He's pretty good. They're quick fill videos. And if we get it in one, we're always happy. And he did it, and that's the magic moment for us, because we know that it was organic and it worked the way that we wanted it to work.
It looks really, it just looks really lovely, and that is a adjective that I think you can apply to Monster Mass when you are someone that is like, it looks lovely. And
Beautiful.
and these variants, I was really excited when I saw the variants, because there's 3 variants right now of Hubert, right? We have the Barlow blue, we have the pale, we have sort of the classic kind of skin tone, and then you can even kind of have the hair removed.
Yeah, and we're going to do some stuff with different ideas for hair on 2 of the new ones coming up. And we haven't done the blood yet, so the blood's coming on the new one. I think the pale is the first one that's going to see blood, because it's a nice contrast. That blood color against the pale is really good. So we always shoot them clean first, and then we'll send them back to paint again, and then we'll add the blood. And so the pale one's coming with blood next. So
awesome.
I'm excited to show you guys that one.
George is breaking some news here.
Yeah. And then I already have
you heard it here
I
first.
have a flesh one with a 5 o'clock shadow scheduled, because we want to see a gruff, that guy. And then and I think we're gonna do a dark hair on that one too, just to see what it looks like with dark hair.
Well,
so, yeah.
I want to be mindful of time, but if you guys are good, I have a couple other questions on this, because so David, you're seeing these things come to life, and you're seeing these variations, and these are now existing. Has that impacted your storytelling as far as like triggering this idea of like, now that I'm seeing this, I have another idea for a story? Or
so we have volume 3, Count Crowley, now the mediocre Midnight Monster Hunter, hitting shelves November 8th. And so I had finished all of the scripts for the new volume by the point at which I was seeing the magic of this dream coming together. And what it did for me, because I've been ruminating on where the story goes next, because when you get into volume 3, things go sideways very quickly for Jerry, and I hopefully am taking readers in a place that they never saw coming, and will hopefully rip your hearts out a little bit, which is always fun. But the importance and the threat that vampires present is so detrimental to Jerry's journey as a appointed monster hunter, that what I wanted to do next with vampires, now seeing what these guys have done with the mask, inspired me in thinking about like how I want to push for future volumes. And then by doing that pushing in the writing, I'm pushing Lucas, who then in turn is turning in designs that are pushing these guys. To me, it's a symbiotic relationship of creature creativity that is kind of got an endless flow. If you're willing to take risks and leaps, like these guys taking a risk and going, we're going to sculpt some masks and work out. And now me seeing that and going, holy crap. And by the way, there's monsters you haven't seen yet, which you're going to see in volume 3, that when these guys get their hands on them, I'm like dying to see if they go, oh, we want to do our version of that monster.
Like, that's what I like hearing. Yeah. Like, throw us some monsters,
Even hearing that, I love monsters, so yeah, I can't wait.
And with series 3, mediocre Midnight Monster Hunter of Count Crowley, November 8th is the first issue. I've seen that you're expanding the world to kind of includes child snatchers, sort of milk carton kids. I don't know if it's true, but I'm picking up a whiff of maybe satanic panic in there. And that kind of previously you've tapped into sort of the media of that era. And now we're evolving a little bit more. Is this accurate, or are you just kind of expanding?
100%. The way hysteria works, especially in fraught times where kind of the hard price of financial insecurity that you can see, and because the story set in the early 80s, reflecting a lot of kind of boom and bust economics like we see in our time, where you go from inflation to boom and inflation to boom, and there's all this fraught stuff going on socially, and it's like all of a sudden the kids disappearing, and where the public's minds go, as opposed to sometimes recognizing and acknowledging the truth is so much stranger than fiction. So like where maybe people think these kids are getting snatched by and who is snatching them, the truth is much darker, much scarier, much more nefarious, but human minds can't even comprehend what is happening to the children of Beloit. It's up to Jerry to have to figure out how to face this. And it's her most, even though she's been facing monsters from the get-go, her most supernatural foe yet, which I'm excited to introduce because I grew up in Kansas, and I no matter what part of the country you grew up in, the world for that matter, your local lore, your local mythology sometimes was the most haunting because it felt the most applicable to you and there was personal connections to it. So there's that. And then of course, just to tease it, but you'll see if you look at the cover that's been dropped now from Lucas Kettner, I have a deep affinity for everything from James Whale's take on it and Mary Shelley's origination of it to what happened with Frank and Hooker and that kind of mythology around reanimated corpse horror. And we're going to get into that, which is some imagery I can't wait to share with the guys at Immortal.
And I love all the Kansas horror guys. Where are you guys?
Yeah, I know. It's wild, right? When you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's just like Satanism and crazy shit that like your childhood. But yeah.
Do you know Darren Bousman? You met, right?
I know Darren. Yeah.
So I worked with Darren.
The Kansas monsters. Yeah.
Well, yeah, saw and
yeah.
We did some Devil's Carnival stuff with him and then Tech Nine, and there's a lot of.
So my wife's from New York, and she's like, I didn't do any of the weird, crazy shit you did. You guys out in the middle of Kansas, like, got up to all the weird stuff because you had nothing to do with your time. But she's like, I could go to the Met, I could go down to the museums.
Right, I grew up in the San Francisco area, so I get it. Yeah.
Well, it's something I know we've touched on before, David, but this notion of the local folklore. Whether it's every town has their version of a Gravity Hill, but every town also has their version of some dogman or some sort of killer. And it gets really tasty when you start thinking about like, well, what if they're all real and they're all kind of maybe slightly different subspecies or whatever connected to the same monsters? And
in the world of Count Crowley, they are, because the mythology traces all the way back. But I know,
Did you have a local? I mean, like I know where
ours was the clown. We had a child snatching clown. There was a local satanic cult mythology about this Satanists that were sacrificing kids and animals out in the farms. There was a mythology around. Well, we had a real serial killer that was on the prowl when I was a kid that really messed up our collective consciousness. Bob Burdella. Okay, he was more gruesome in many ways, in my opinion, than even the Dahmers of stuff. So. Yeah, we had all that. We had Spooklight Road. There's a lot of ghost mythology, certain houses. We had Stoll, Kansas, where there's an old abandoned church that supposedly was one of the 7 gates to hell. We had a lot of cool, crazy mythology.
Yeah, I had the Winchester Mystery House.
Winchester, I've been to. I love that. And a door slammed behind me and Eve once. We were alone in this room in the Winchester House, and we were like, ooh, it feels like somebody's in here with us. And I'm not shitting you. A door slammed. Even I were like, okay, we're out of here. But I will say this. I also grew up in like a pretty conservatively hyper-religious community. And I think in that community and that kind of mentality, sometimes the fear of what's out in the darkness and the other can really thrive because it's usually not as much fact or science-based. It's usually its own kind of modern myth-based. And I remember that was a big, like, there was no question in the household I was raised that like there were demons and there were monsters and there were ghosts.
I went to like Catholic schools. Jesuit schools. So
exorcisms are a real thing, man.
Right. So I was affected. Those movies that affected me the most was like anything that was religious, supernatural exorcism. Obviously,
totally. Me too.
Like still,
still gets me.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've talked before. I was also raised Catholic. I was also raised like where these things are. Yes, they exist. Exorcisms and demons exist. But the kind of curious thing, and this is something that I think Count Crowley kind of in a very savvy way taps into, is that when you're focusing on the Satan is everywhere and trying to corrupt children, and there's child snatchers everywhere and they're trying to take the kids, when you're focusing on all of these things, it in a way becomes this moral smoke and mirrors that then obscures the actual threats that are going on.
Your eye is not on the ball.
Yeah.
And then you're missing the true threat, which is the way that monsters in the world of Count Crowley have come to get so powerful, is they've recognized that humans are so easily manipulated through, fear mongering and fearing one another. So they've been creating all this fake news, all this fake, data. So if you start reading the comic, you'll see that wooden stakes will not kill a vampire. And a silver bullet will never thwart a werewolf. And you're going to think you know how to fight these things because they've tricked us into believing that we know what to do when they come. And I think that happens to us in real life too, with the bad forces that exist around us, trying to separate us from each other, trying to keep us from, taking care of each other and ourselves. So hopefully that's the theme that, can ring true for folks.
Well, before I wrap up, I guess my question is, I think this is kind of a good segue to it. We're talking about masks, we're talking about Immortal mask and the Count Crowley mask, but I want to know, what are the masks from your childhood that both terrified and delighted you? Maybe it's a trick-or-treating mask that you saw out there. Maybe it's a vintage, plastic mask. Tell me about that time you saw one that it
Sure.
just got you.
Go ahead.
My dad had that Tor mask, like that old
Tor Johnson.
Yeah.
The Tor Johnson was legendary.
Somehow that, my dad's a dentist. Like, why would he, but he loved that thing. And I remember two things about it. One, on my dad, it was terrifying. And then two, I remember that smell that it had.
Yes.
It was like a vinyl. It wasn't the latex that we grew up with, because this is 70s to 80s.
Sure.
Around that time. That's my first thing with a mask that I remember invoking any kind of emotional response for me.
I had deep memories of going to Woolworths and Montgomery Ward as a kid and getting my first Halloween vinyl record, which scared the crap out of me, but being obsessed with like the Sherman style, the box masks, costumes with the plastic looking like a fire hazard kind of situation. There was a Bigfoot one that was one of the first I ever wore. The face looked like a werewolf, so I loved him, but he wasn't as threatening as the Wolfman, because werewolves were my biggest fear as a kid. I had a clown one that was unintentionally quite scary. I've got a great photo of me as a kid in that. There was the latex Melty Man face with the eye drop, which was very, very popular, and I got that was like an investment. Maybe at that time it was like $12.99 or something, but I used it for my basement or front door haunted housing. And finally, we had a neighbor who wasn't in horror. I grew up in Kansas. I don't remember what he did for, I think he was a high school teacher, but he had a really, really well done Planet of the Apes mask. And I don't know how long he had it, but this was been in like 82, 83. I'm a very little kid.
Was it the chimp or the gorilla? Because they had a gorilla one too. That was really cool.
It was the chimp. It was, he would just wear it around Halloween time. And it put the fear of God, something about seeing his eyes through the eye holes and him sitting there with the candy. And oh crap, man, it brings it right back.
I remember,
Are you
sure? Kit bashing, like Halloween masks and stuff. I was never satisfied. I guess it makes sense what we do now, but I was never satisfied with
what came in the box,
the store bought. So I wanted to manipulate it. Like when we were kids, there was these things. They were called zany zappers, and they were the first time you got they were glasses that had a little LED here, and you could press a button and they lit up your eyes.
Oh,
yeah. And I remember thinking I was ingenious by sticking my set of zany zappers under a gorilla mask, and then that Halloween I was the one that had the crazy glowing eyes. That wasn't a thing in masks yet, and so I remember at an early age, I was ahead of his time. I always wanted to outdo what my friends did, the neighbors did, and stuff like that. So that makes sense now.
Yeah,
mask company.
I love it. Well, okay, so I'm going to do an ending, and then we'll wrap up, and then just hang on for a second afterwards, okay?
Yep.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We've been talking about the Count Crowley Midnight Monster Hunter, now mediocre Midnight Monster Hunter masks. That's a lot of M's. Available from immortalmask.com, available now, plus Series 3 of Count Crowley, Mediocre Midnight Monster Hunter, launches with issue 1 this November 8th. So I would say it is spooky season is Count Crowley season. My guests are David Dastmalchian and George Frangidakis, and we had some cameos from the Immortal Mask co-owners, Andrew Freeman and Michelle Freeman. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. And I had such a blast talking about masks, and now awesome, I need to get some.
You're the best. Thank you so much, man. That was so cool.
And I'm Aaron Sagers, and this has been Talking Strange. Until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.